you're very welcome to the podcast. My name is Anita Bourne and I'm the founder of the Femcast, a podcast and website driven by a passion for empowering women and promoting gender equality. Through the Femcast, we are making it our mission to educate, empower and encourage women to harness the power of their voices, share their stories and raise awareness of the crucial issues affecting women today. By amplifying women's voices, the Femcast aims to strengthen women's rights and celebrate the achievements of women everywhere. We are passionate about making a positive impact through storytelling, advocacy, and creating a supportive community to act as an inspiration to others who aspire to effect change. Come visit our website www.thefemcast.com for more information on what we do and resources to help you. On this episode of the Bullied Brain, we talk about statistics and studies around bullying in schools and the need for an upstream approach to address the issue. We highlight the impact of bullying on children. We talk about the need for a different approach to tackle bullying, focusing on early intervention. We talk about the concept of teaching children about brain health and providing daily exercises to promote brain well-being, and how children should be taught empathy and compassion and a focus on their brain health being prioritised alongside academic subjects. Jen emphasises the importance of addressing the underlying issues of trauma and adversity that children may be facing rather than solely focusing on addressing bullying behaviour itself. And we talk about the long-term consequences of bullying, including its association with criminality later in life.
Hi Jen, you're very welcome back today and thank you for joining us on the Femcast.
Thanks
How
for
are
having
you?
me. Yeah, I'm good. I love to be here.
That's great. So today we're going to look at the bullying in schools and statistics. So in Ireland, 200,000 students were interviewed, the ages 10 to 18. 31% were primary school, so they were 10 to 12-year-olds that were interviewed. 16% were secondary school, 12 to 18. 74% of primary school children reported being bullied in the playground, and in secondary school, 47% in the classroom, 37% in corridors, 27% in the playground, and 19% going to and from school. There's large statistics there. Of the parents interviewed, 40% had one or more children been bullied. 80% had children been bullied. 91% had children been bullied by the same sex. 62% said it was carried out by more than one bully. 30%, the highest percentage, are 12 to 13-year-olds that have been bullied in schools. 22% said their children were first bullied between the ages of 8 and 9 years old. And 80% believe the Gardaí, which is our police force, should not get involved. And 68% believe stronger action should be taken. How do we stop this bullying in schools, peer-to-peer? And the statistics are high for 10 to 12-year-olds. That's massive.
Yeah, I mean, so as we like to talk about, you and me, we take a bullied brain perspective on these issues. And that's not meant to discount other ways of approaching the crisis, because it is a crisis and it is an epidemic and it keeps getting worse. So the approaches that we're taking, I would argue, are trapped. They're caught in what I call the bullying and abuse paradigm. And the bullying and abuse paradigm is like a framework and it's a way of thinking, and it's not helping us. We're not getting anywhere by trying to look at the bullying issue in a downstream way, as you and I've talked about, Anita. What would it look like if we just said, okay, let's just do something different. Let's do something new. Let's look at this upstream. Let's start early. Let's start before bullying behavior start to manifest. Let's look at our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds. What's going on in their lives? Now, there was an incredibly important study done called the Dunedin study. And the Dunedin study showed that by 3 years old, they are able to accurately predict who will be on social welfare as an adult. And yeah. And it's really heartbreaking stuff where these kids are growing up with parents who feel like they can't support and care for them. They don't feel like they've fulfilled their own potential, and they feel like it's a cycle they can't escape. This intergenerational poverty, it's so hard to get out of these kinds of structures. um, and and yet, they have these children, and these children are slated for this kind of future. So we know right there, it's like, okay, let's say to ourselves, this is a big social problem, and let's look at the 3-year olds, and let's say to ourselves, what could we do differently so that 3-year old does not end up on welfare? Now, another key study that we have to factor in, key research when we're talking about this, is the ACE study. And the ACE study stands for the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, ACE. And it's called ACE for short. And it took place in the late 1990s in America. Two American doctors began surveying their patients, these adult patients, almost 20,000 of them. And they had 10 questions. And then they had all kinds of questions about their health, like 68 or 70 questions about their health and their health issues and chronic illness and everything, their health history. But the 10 key questions that interest you and me here today are questions that were about the children's experience in their lives from up until the age of 18 in their homes with adversity at the hands of adults. So it wasn't things like I immigrated or there was a natural disaster or things like that. It was about adults, treatment, and behaviors and how they impacted children. 10 questions. So the 10 questions were things like, do you witness domestic abuse? Is there domestic abuse in your home? Is there a family member in your household who has a mental health issue? Is there an adult in your household who has a substance abuse issue? Is there an adult that has been incarcerated? So these are the key kind of questions around adult behaviors, how they impact children. The other 5 questions revolved around abuse. Are you emotionally abused in your home? So put downs, berating, being sworn at, humiliated, these kinds of things. Are you emotionally neglected? The parents are too busy at work. They're too obsessed with their phones. They have their own emotional trauma and they can't connect with you. So emotional neglect. Then it looked at sexual abuse, and physical neglect. So these 10 issues, there's one more. I think one was substance abuse, drugs, and the other one was alcohol. But so you imagine these are all adult behaviors impacting children. So when you get kids coming into the school system, I mean, really, let's say we've got our 4-year olds and 5-year olds and they're starting kindergarten. I would argue if we want to do an upstream approach to these kids, we have to understand that quite a number of them, surprisingly, are coming from trauma. Just like intergenerational poverty is a cycle, intergenerational trauma is a cycle. If you've got two parents who grew up with trauma, it's almost it's so difficult not to pass it on, right? Just like our kids inherit from us our good qualities and our strengths and our any wealth that we build, they also inherit our traumas. The things we don't sort through, our unmetabolized abuses that have occurred to us that we might even be unconscious of. And, as you and I talked about before, Anita, and this is really what the focus of my book is about. So, in the Bullied Brain, what I want people to understand is a lot of us are walking around with neurological scars. We don't know that our brains have been harmed by the bullying and abuse that we suffered, or the adversity at the hands of adults, or being trapped in the poverty cycle. Those things all impact our brains, and it can be seen on brain scans. So when kids coming to school at 4 and 5, what we want to do is say, okay, first of all, let's make them aware of their brains as much as possible and say to them, you know what you need to learn and what we're going to look at every single day at school, just like we have time to look at math or learning the alphabet, we also have time to look at your brain health every single day, your body health, brain health, because it's actually the most important thing, more important than academic subjects. It's going to give you the most opportunity to be healthy and succeed in your life is to have a healthy brain and a healthy body. So let's go. Let's carve out time every single day. And I mean, obviously, with little ones, you're going to start with really simple, basic things And as you get all the way up to 18, they will become more and more sophisticated. So what you would want to do is catch bullying behaviors. Jump in.
Yeah, I was wondering, this all seems easy. It seems like this is the answer, or it is the answer, yet we don't do it. Bullying has been going on for decades and decades of schooling. They know what to do, yet here we are. When do you think they'll actually bring this in? Like the first time I heard bully side was when we spoke earlier in this series, and I'd never heard it called that before. So if we can start that now, but how do you change a system that's been there for centuries and they do the same thing, even though technology, everything has moved on in the world, and something so simple as brain exercises in the morning, like the way in my day we'd have to jump up and down and do star jumps to keep warm. But you know what I mean? It's really apparent that you do this, yet we're not doing it.
That is the big, big question. And I mean, just the fact that you and I are here talking and you're creating a platform and you're making these conversations get out into the world. And I've been interviewed on many podcasts, and there's a lot of people interested in how do we make change. And I feel like, and I write about this in the book, I call it a brain fitness revolution. And, to start a revolution is never easy. But, Anita, I look at Iran and I look at those people and they are putting their lives on the line. There's been close to 300 murders, essentially, of protesters. Kids, they're killing kids. They just sentenced a protester to a death sentence. Now, if they can find that kind of courage and that kind of tenacity and fight to overturn a regime like what they have in Iran, where they're putting their lives on the line, we can change our education system. We can absolutely change it. We can get parents educated and parents advocating for their kids. We can get teachers and coaches completely on side so that they say, you know what, you give us all this curriculum, you say we have to reach all these math goals, our kids aren't healthy. They're not well. We need to know first that their brains are flourishing and healthy and recovering from the traumas that they suffer. Then we'll get to the math. But let's prioritize. Let's be really smart about what we're doing. We have an epidemic of mental health issues in our youth populations. We have never seen bullycide or suicide be so high. Let's deal with the crisis, and then all of the other parts of the machine can be dealt with, but they're not priority. Priority is health, and it's
Mm.
got to be brain health. So, I mean, going back to, as I think you and I talked about, kids, they get their teeth checked once or twice a year.
Mm.
They get their eyes checked, they get their ears checked. We know this is important for them to be able to fulfill their potential and to be healthy. They need to have their brains checked and they need to work with any troubles that they've got, you know? And they have so much research on how trauma, so abuse, adversity at home, in school, it is an incredibly negative effect on the brain. So we need to eliminate it. We need to work really hard with families. If a family's struggling, they need help. They need a community of nurses and doctors and social workers and people that step in, neighbors, and say, you know what? We're here to help. We're the human community, and we only all are going to flourish when we work together. And I know it sounds hokey and like too hopeful, but
But
let's
why
just
can't we hope for that?
I know.
Like,
That's what I
why
hope.
can't we hope that a school system will see? And I know these kids that are bullying are damaged because they've underdeveloped brains. It's coming from somewhere because kids aren't born bullies. They're not born bullies. They're born to connect. They're loving. They're kind. They love unconditionally. It's adults that turn them into bullies, I believe.
That's exactly it. That's it. That is the cycle. You just named it. So every single adult that listens to the statistics that you just gave us, Anita, needs to say, what can adults change? Every single one of us in our lives. What can we change so that our children are not manifesting so much bullying behaviors? Because it's unnatural. If we saw animal populations behaving this way, turning on each other, fighting, tearing one another apart, we would recognize that there was something very, very wrong with how they're, is it because they're in captivity?
Mm.
Is it because our kids are being forced to sit in death cell, which is incredibly unhealthy?
Massively unhealthy. Like, what is it? 5.5, 6 hours a day, all
Oh,
doing the same thing when every individual is different. But what was interesting was that 68% believe stronger action should be taken. But doesn't that start at home?
well, I think the stronger actions, first of all, it needs to start at home and it needs to be reinforced at school and it needs to be reinforced in sports and clubs. But in actual fact, I mean, in my work, I study adult abuse. I study what adults do to children. And, you can't send your child safely anywhere right now. You can't send them to church without worrying that they're going to be abused. And I mean, that's a huge problem in our society. We don't have enough child safety. So, I mean, stronger actions should be taken towards adults, is what I would say. I think that children need tons of empathy and tons of compassion. If they're manifesting behaviors that show that at early ages, they're showing the signs of mental illness, which is fight behaviors, aggressive behaviors, lack of self regulation. I mean, these kids that go to school that are looking for a target, that spend their time instead of playing, instead of having fun, instead of kicking a soccer ball around, they're looking for someone to hurt. That's incredibly unhealthy. They're not bad. It's not a moral crisis, it's a medical one. It's a brain health crisis that we need to address from that place. And if we taught our kids about their brains, I mean, Anita, give us the statistics on bullying in childhood and criminality, because that's going to make a key point.
Yeah, so this is a study done in America. I don't have any fear for Ireland, but it's estimated that 1 out of 4 school bullies in the USA will have a criminal record by the time they're 30. And studies in Scandinavia show that approximately 60% of boys who are characterized as bullies in grades 6 to 9, at least one conviction by the age of 24, and 30 to 40% of former bullies have 3 or more convictions by this age. That's huge. And former school bullies had a 4-fold increase in the level of relatively serious criminality as documented in official crime records. But I thought what was really sad was when you just said there that the child is going to school and he's looking for a target instead of running around the yard playing catch or whatever they do, or, connecting with peers, that he's looking for a target to bully, or she is looking for a target to bully. I think that is just so sad that he's not actually there, that person isn't actually having a nice childhood, and that it is a mental illness.
It is. It's like, I mean, one of my favorite articles, actually. It's really brilliantly written, and it's about narcissism and bullying. And it says, narcissists, they don't grow up in a happy home. They come from adversity. They come from abuse. They come from bullying. They come from trouble. And, they grow up into this form of mental illness that we all talk about all the time. They become narcissists. And a narcissist, like going back to think of the kid on the playground, an early sign of narcissism is a child looking for a target. Why do they need that target? They need someone to act as a mirror. They need the person to reflect them back because they already are feeling a huge emptiness inside. They don't feel whole and happy. They're not laughing with their friends. They're not curious. They're not learning. They're not at school to develop. They're not dreaming of a career. They are looking at an early age for someone to reflect back their own sense of selfhood, their own power, their own, aggrandized sense of self because they've been hurt. That's not natural behavior. I don't need anyone out in the world to reflect me back. I just feel whole unto myself. I've been lucky. I didn't grow up in a home where I was abused, or I didn't go, well, I was going to say I didn't go to a school where I was abused, but that's not true. I did.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Yeah.
Well, it's just funny. I was going to say, oh, I wasn't abused at school, but I actually was. But I've done a lot of work to get better.
Yeah.
And Rita, this is why I'm hopeful. I am an abuse victim. I was brutally abused by 3 teachers. Lots of other kids were too, went to court, the whole thing. I was brutally abused and manipulated from 13 to 17 by 3 teachers. And I'm better.
But it didn't turn you into a bully. Like, Adults use sometimes it's a cop out for some adults. They're like, oh, monkey see, monkey do. And they use it as an excuse. But we've been bullied and we don't turn into bullies. So I think as you get to an adult, it's on you to work on yourself, heal. I get that the brain isn't developed. Somebody else controls everything they do. And like you say, they're mirroring, they want that target to mirror what they're going through. But as we get to adult and the narcissistic behavior in some people, that's on them, even though they've grown up in that.
Well, it goes back to this business of taking stronger measures. So I agree with you. And I have a sense that when adults are behaving in abusive ways, that's where we need strong intervention. And it needs to be quick. And there needs to be consequences, transparency, and accountability. And not because we're going to treat that adult as if they're a bad person, because they're not. As we've just discussed, what they're showing is they have a very hurt brain. And it's infectious is the problem. Hurt brains hurt. They hurt other people. They hurt inside. They do lots of damage. Why would we? It's like someone walking around with a contagious virus. Why would we ever allow that to happen? So, but we are so, like we said at the beginning, we're trapped in this abusive bullying framework. We really struggle to exit it. And it's hard for us, when an adult gets reports about them as being abusive, our system is very, very broken in how we deal with it. We don't deal with it properly. We treat it as a moral issue. We cover it up. We are complicit with the perpetrator that did it. We have been oftentimes groomed by them if we're a leader, so that we're negligent, we're complicit. We don't, if we hold them accountable, we'll have to be held accountable. We don't want that, so we cover up. I mean, this is happening all over the world. It's being discussed everywhere. I mean, it's a crisis in Canada right now. It's a crisis in the US. It's like going back to what we said at the beginning, there has to be a better way. And so this is my whole approach. Like, and this is, as you know, this is what the book's about. It's like, what would happen if we stopped the outdated morality framework? People who behave this way are bad people. And we instead said, oof, people who are behaving this way, whether they're children or adults, they are not mentally healthy. They have quite likely damaged brains. Let's get them the rehabilitation that they need. And this is not to excuse harmful adult behaviors. And this is not to say that all people can be rehabilitated. I'm just speaking generally. There's immense complexity to all of this, which, we need to leave to the experts. We leave that to the neuroscientists, and we leave it to the psychiatrists and the psychologists and the medical doctors. They're the real experts who can ultimately work with an individual and see whether or not they can get them better. But anything like that we do is going to be a healthier way to handle this crisis in society, which shows us that bullying and abuse are not getting better. Everything that we do is not working. We have to admit to ourselves it's not working and do something different. And this, for me, is why I look at it as a public health crisis, an urgent public health crisis.
Exactly, yeah. Because there would be no adult bullies if we dealt with it younger and started instead of, I don't know, algebra that we never use anyway. Well, of course, if you're a scientist, you probably do. But, if we get them younger and get them focused on brain health, like we do with, you have to eat your 5 veg a day. You have to make sure that you have enough water, that we do the same with brain health and catch them
Absolutely.
early. And then we don't have people in prisons and we don't have adult bullies. When are they going to name it as a health care problem?
Well, a couple, like, was around 2 years ago in the United States, and a massive announcement came out from the Center for Disease Control. So, the top medical doctor in the United States announced that mental health is at an urgent breaking point in our youth populations. And what makes me crazy is that we don't then say, okay, what can we change in our society so that our children are not suffering from such high levels of mental health crisis? Well, first of all, as you say, let's take a look at sex education in schools. People have and had lots of issues around that. But if you look at the research shows that the earlier we start and the more we teach kids about sexuality and their bodies and procreation, the less unwanted pregnancies happen. the less sexually transmitted diseases, and the less destructive kind of sexual behaviors between kids. It really works. It helps. So, same thing. We need to change the way we talk to children about bullying and abuse. And then ultimately, of course, we want all the adults to be on side. We want to change the vocabulary for all of us. So that, one of the things that I write about is, so I do a blog for Psychology Today. And one of the blogs I wrote about, I said, why don't we teach kids that if someone is bullying on the playground or in the locker or in a classroom, um, that the children need to understand that that person is issuing a cry for help. Right now, we teach kids that these kids are dangerous and powerful and they're going to hurt you and you're going to be a victim. You're going to be a target. Why don't we teach the flip? Why don't we say, you know what? The second you see a kid who's bullying, that child is telling you that there's trouble. They've got adversity in their lives of a serious kind. And they're waving a red flag saying, I'm starting to have mental illness problems. I'm having a mental health crisis. It's a cry for help. And the adults and the kids should really create a container of care for that kid. Let's go to the principal and say, look, this child's family must be struggling in some way. We need to intervene. We need to help. This child is manifesting mental illness.
Yeah, because they've recently brought into schools, the friendship bench, where kids go and say, if they sit on their own and then someone will join them if they're on their own, so they're not on their own. If we could do that, and they've started implementing that in school, if you could have that where the children know and recognize this child is struggling, somebody needs to bring it to the teacher's attention. They're not telling tales, they're just trying to help, and that it is a cry for help. So I believe it is a cry for help when they're that small and that young. And if you're bullying at, 8, 9 year olds bullying each other, that's incredibly sad.
It's incredibly sad. And I mean, so I live in the province, British Columbia, and the province next to us is Alberta. And last fall, an 8-year-old girl took her life because she was being
Yes.
so badly
How do
bullied.
you know what to do at 8 years of age?
That's how desperate they are. And that's another piece of this. I want kids to learn that when they feel suicidal ideation, that's a brain problem. They need to understand that their brain is suffering so much trauma from destructive behaviors, either abuse, in the home or bullying at school. It's so traumatizing to the brain that it's looking for a way to get away from it. And, again, it's so much about language. It's so much teaching kids. If you feel suicidal ideation, first of all, you need to know that's a brain issue. It can be addressed. Mental health professionals, doctors, your parents, it doesn't matter who. You need to go to the trusted adult, your teacher, and coach and get the help that you need, because you would if you had a broken bone. If your leg was broken, you'd go to a professional. You'd say to your parents, I have all this pain in my leg. Oh, let's look. It's very, very swollen. Oh, let's get a professional to do an x-ray. Oh, we can see that the bone is broken in this particular way. So we're going to put a very special cast on that's going to protect and allow the bone to heal. And the brain is incredibly adept, like our bones, at healing. If you are doing the correct evidence-based practices and you're working with a professional, you can do so much repair work with any kind of a brain, not just the physical traumas that happen to the brain from bullying and abuse, all different forms, which show up on brain scans. You can repair those. You can restore your organic brain health. But you can also do that in all kinds of ways, preventative ways in adolescence, for things like bipolar and schizophrenia and depression and anxiety, and even really traumatic injuries to the brain, like when you have multiple concussions or a traumatic brain injury from an accident. Even in those cases, it's incredible how much the brain can repair.
So there is a solution, and it's preventable. The
It's
bullying and the
preventable.
going on to be adults bullies, and criminal records. Then we have prison time, and you're pumping all the money in after the person's
Well,
bolted as such.
and Anita, let's go back to the criminality. I forgot. I didn't even really talk about that. But the point I wanted to make about that was, if you have a child who's bullied on the playground, once again, everyone should show empathy and compassion. They don't need to be punished. They need to be helped right away. It's urgent. They're showing really serious issues that could land them in criminal justice system and jail. It's going to ruin their lives to get a conviction. It's going to hold them back. It's going to spoil their career. I mean, we have to understand if a child is showing that behavior and we know that this is putting them on the path to criminality, we have to help them. We don't need to treat them as if they're bad. They don't need to be suspended and expelled. They need the most urgent, caring, informed, brain informed, psychology informed support. They need a social worker immediately. That's what needs to happen. And, if we started to work with families that were struggling, think of the money we would save. Everybody says, oh, we don't have the resources for that. Well, if we have the resources for a jail, most expensive thing on the planet, of our
Absolutely, yeah.
we've also got money to intervene with a kid that's struggling and a family that's struggling. Let's get them the help they need. That's where I want my resources and taxpayer dollars to go. I don't want it to go to a jail.
Yeah, just on that, the resources and taxpayers' money later on. People in government, how do they not see this? We take, if we don't want unwanted pregnancies, and that's what they drum into young children, contraceptives or abstain. But yet we don't do it for bullying, which is the biggest, and like you say yourself, this is a health crisis. And we don't do that. Yet we'll spend the money years down the road on keeping them incarcerated with this mental illness.
Mm. Yeah, actually, that's such a great way to put it. Incarcerated with mental illness. I mean,
Yeah.
just that phrase alone says so much about how outdated the system is. Locking people up that are manifesting aggressive, destructive mental illness behaviors. It doesn't make any sense. It's so outdated. But the big problem is we live in a society that ignores the brain. If we were a society that from, in kindergarten, when we're having our kids color in pictures, we have them coloring in a picture of the brain. And we show them, we say, this is what your brain looks like. It's this unbelievable, almost magical, powerful thing you have hidden in your skull. And this is what your brain does. And this is how it manages your body budget. And this is how it's it's the captain of your ship. It's the
That'd
thing.
be beautiful.
I
Imagine
know.
learning about the brain like that. Wouldn't it be just gorgeous in school instead of, you put on a cape and point up at a building and you're on the roof of it, like to actually get them to see, actually, this is within you. It's in your skull. You own this.
Well, and then the next step, week 2, you teach them the way your brain looks is going to be dependent on the environment that you're in. So are you in a wonderful school environment where it's safe? Is your teacher trustworthy and kind and empathic and really good at classroom management and seeing all the kids as different, unique beings? And does she relate to them or he relate to them? Is class a safe and creative and healthy place? Because that environment is going to affect your brain. It's going to change the way it actually physically works. And here's another thing, even more exciting. You've got this superpower in your head, and it's going to change and develop and be stronger or weaker, depending on what you do, depending on what you practice. You have huge agency. You are empowered to be an incredible caretaker of this unique and unbelievable resource that's here, but you have to make it visible. Kids, we ignore our brain because we can't see them. Well, let's make the brain the most visible thing in the world.
Isn't it strange that in 2022, we still don't have psychologists in schools or social care workers where they're just have a little office, and if a child is struggling like that, excuse me, like you say, they're coming from a bad place. So this is why they're picking targets in the playground and they're bullying, that they don't come in and that they can quietly go down. Like, in some schools, they have a nursing school that they can quietly go down and say, this is happening to me, so that we catch them. The earlier we catch them, the better for them. And then they can go on and flourish. Or even that we have them for the child that is bullied, because it's very secretive. The child carries a lot of shame because they're bullied. and that we take away that stigma like we have done for the last 10 years on mental health, that we take away the stigma of being bullied and the stigma for the bully, and we help them, and we help them be better people. And they're only little people at this stage when they're in school.
Well, imagine what it would be like. I love your idea, first of all. I love the idea of every single school has a psychology area.
Mm.
There's a mental health professional. It's the place to go if you're struggling. And if a child is identified as bullying other children, they don't get in trouble. They go and see the psychologists at school. They go and see the mindfulness practitioner at school. They go to the safe room. There's a beautiful, quiet, safe place for kids when they're having a mental health struggle. So if imagine this, Anita, you're going to school and you feel the impulse to find a target. You've had a horrible weekend at home. There's been domestic violence. You've been full of fear. You decide that you're going to align with the aggressor because your brain thinks this will keep you safer. So you go to school and you're hunting down a target. You got to find somebody to make you feel better. You need someone to hold a mirror up to you that makes you feel good again. The second you feel those impulses, you say to yourself, oh gosh, we've been studying this since kindergarten. I know that this impulse is actually, I'm caught up in a sympathetic stress response. My brain is actually so full of fear, so full of anxiety that I'm trying to release it by finding someone to bully. I need to go to the psychologist. I'll go and talk to him. I'm going to go and talk to the mindfulness expert. I know that she can help me with a bunch of strategies to calm down my sympathetic nervous system. She can help me drop the cortisol, lower the adrenaline, do the deep breathing required to return to a feeling of safety and wholeness and calm. She will activate my parasympathetic nervous system, which the neuroscientists call rest and digest. As just a quick reminder, it's when your body feels safe and your brain feels safe. And that's what the deep breathing does. It tells your brain there isn't a predator. Well, you can imagine if you're a kid going to school and you're on the hunt, you're like a predator seeking prey. It's a very like, oh, it's just amazing that we don't teach this stuff and we don't
Yeah,
create these kinds of schools.
exactly. Like it's the creating the schools for like I know what a sympathetic nervous system is because I've spent 2 years uh, reading up about it and stuff because I'm coming from a place where I was bullied. And I know about the nervous system and how you get sick and your immune system just goes through the floor and then it becomes physical. So it starts in the brain, then it goes into your nervous system. It feels like you're on fire, and then it's physical. So if we could just teach children about the nervous system, like it took me. I'm 50, and I'm only learning about it. And understanding what happened and what went wrong. So I don't know, like how I got this far in life and never knew about it. I suppose I didn't need to know about it because it wasn't happening before now. But for kids, if we teach them, like we teach them, you've got to look left and right when you cross a road. You've got to remember that if you go out and bully another child, this damages your brain as much as it does the child you're bullying.
Yeah. And I mean, telling kids too, these bullying behaviors, yeah, you really are worrying us because the statistics show that you might end up in the criminal justice system if you keep behaving this way. So it's really serious. We need to intervene and get you the help you need right now. We need you to work with us. Let us know what's going on. What can we do to
Yeah.
help? We don't
Yeah.
we're not going to take you away from your family. We're going to find out a solution, a support system. We're going to do everything we can to get your family better and to get you better. Why? And the government should be saying to itself, because it will save us billions of dollars in downstream
Later.
health, mental health, criminal justice system, substance abuse. Why don't we start treating it at the source rather than paying out all the money down at the end when it's just tragic, all these things. They're
Mm.
preventable. So, another thing that you said that was really important. Hang on a second. Oh, I can't remember, but I'll get back to it. But a thing I wanted to say was, one of the things that you see more and more in schools, certainly in the United States, is they have police at school. If we can afford to have police at school because there's so much psychological lack of safety and physical lack of safety, why don't we have the money for the psychologist and the mindfulness practitioner and the safe room? I mean,
Are the police at schools because of school shootings, or is that the reason they're in schools?
It's a number. That's one of the reasons, but there's lots of violence in schools. I mean, even
Wow.
here in Canada, there's been recently. I don't even like to read the articles. It's like stabbings at schools. It's just
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. Oh yes, what I wanted to say, Anita, that's really important. It's come up in our conversation a number of times. We know that if you want a child to learn football, or you want them to learn how to play the violin, or you want them to learn algebra, because we've decided that these are the critical things children must learn, we teach them over and over again. They start in kindergarten and they build the skills, they build the knowledge all the way up to 18 if they're going to pursue it. It's the same thing with brain health. You can't just teach it in a workshop one day. It has to
Mm.
be taught. So the brain learns by repetition at timed intervals. So if we want kids to learn that bullying actually can land them in the criminal justice system, if we want them to learn that when they bully other children, they're actually doing harm to their own brain and the victim's brain, et cetera, et cetera. If we want these lessons about this is what your brain looks like, this is how you can get it stronger. These are the things that will weaken and hurt it. We have to avoid them and talk about them so that we keep you healthy and safe and all the other kids and the adults healthy and safe. Those conversations have to happen every day, just like we teach music every day, language every day, math every day, brain health, and how to self regulate and how to care for, a brain that is caring and empathic and connected. That needs to be taught every day.
Yeah. On 2/3 of teens being cyberbullied is worse than face-to-face bullying. This cyberbullying now, like in our day, it was face-to-face. We didn't have phones, but now it's getting worse with the cyberbullying. Kids are addicted to phones. They want to be on. They're constantly switched on. Their brain is waiting for that notification to come in. This is another thing: is the cyberbullying. When after we've left the schoolyard, it's home with you now. It's in your hand. You're on. There's no getting away from it, and your brain is constantly switched on to the effects of bullying. And the other thing was, nearly half of the Irish teens that were interviewed said that the cyberbullying is more of an issue than drug use or drug abuse. And remember, like in the 80s, Reagan and all, don't just say no. And this whole, we started learning drugs is bad and everything. And they did this massive, they pumped so much money into it. Yet here we are that it's as old as anything, the bullying, and we still don't put money into it.
No, I mean, cyberbullying and I mean, phones in general, and the fact that children are being raised in a world where they don't think that they can be separated from their phone, and the adults in their worlds are always on their phone and with their phone as if it's this kind of, it's like another limb, on their bodies, and it makes them accessible at all times, and it also draws their brain into, this wider world, and a lot of it, is really unhealthy. Like the cruelty on the internet is just kind of staggering. And
Mm.
there's lots of, I mean, there's really interesting research done on the fact that, you know, if you cyber bully somebody, you can't see them registering pain. You don't see it. You just are in your own world of lashing out. And our brains, as going back to what you were saying, Anita, you said children aren't born bullies. No, they're not. Their brains are actually wired for empathy.
Mm.
So, and empathy is considered one of the greatest qualities in the work world and in leadership. So it's a great thing to foster in children. We should really be building on this empathy system that they have in their brain. And instead, we allow this incredibly important part of their brain to be eroded. I mean, look at all the statistics on the kids that every single time you are bullying, you are eroding your neural network or your system, your mirror neuron system. However, that neuroscientists have different ways of talking about it. You're damaging that part of your brain. It's not really, it's a
Yeah.
net, but you get the
So,
idea.
would you teach the child to be more selfish about themselves? And I mean selfish in a good way, as in, if you go out and bully another child, you're going to damage your brain. Think about that.
Well, I think
And
it's
then kind of that kind of approach, and go, be selfish about this, as in, you want the best, you're better than that, and you want better for yourself. You don't want to have a damaged brain. You don't want mental illness down the road. So don't go out and bully Joey.
Cool. I mean, can you imagine, like, and it goes back to what we talked about before, changing our language, changing our messaging, changing how we talk to kids about bullying and making it a brain issue. You know, kids that come to school, I mean, actually, another way to think about it is a kid going to school who self-harms. Children that those behaviors, those self-harm behaviors are indicative of really serious mental health suffering. Well, bullying is just the flip side of that. They're acting it out as an aggression, as they're choosing fight. That the child that's doing self-harm is they could be in freeze mode where they're just quiet. They don't talk. They want to disappear. They don't attend school oftentimes. They skip school. That's very much freeze mode, and they get bypassed and ignored by teachers because they seem really, they're not a problem. They're way more likely to notice the aggressive child who's causing trouble than the kid that's quiet. And then flight, same thing. But these are all responses to trauma. This is the sympathetic nervous system. It's trying to figure out a way to keep the child safe, and it doesn't know how to do it. So the child that goes to school and bullies is a brain trying to manifest huge aggressive behaviors, believing that that's the safest place for the child. Just like if you're a dog that is being regularly beaten and hurt, if someone approaches you, you're going to growl, you're going to bare your teeth, you're going to act menacing because you're trying to remain safe. That dog brain is going, uh-oh, more abuse is coming. So the traumatized child's brain who gets abused at home, potentially, or maybe at school by a teacher or a coach in sports, or however they're getting traumatized, when they come to school, they're manifesting their most aggressive self to keep safe. So we need to teach kids these things. And I think every young person I've ever talked to about neuroscience is fascinated. They are dying to know more about their brains. They want to learn how to manage them. They want to learn how they work. I think it would be the most exciting subject to be teaching at school.
And it's really exciting. It's so exciting. Like, because I'm fascinated by the quick turnaround. When you hear of people getting brain injuries and how they've come back from that.
It's amazing. The brain is so, even like one of my favorite books that I think you would love, Anita, is called Softwired by Michael Merzenich, the neuroscientist who wrote the foreword to my book and my Bullied Brain. And he also went through my book and read every single word of it. And he was just passionate about this subject, like you and me are, passionate about the potential of changing how bullying happens in our world and how we deal with it with kids, how we help adults who need the help. He talks about brain injuries in Softwired and what they can do to help people who have them. Like someone can have a stroke and can get themselves better by practice. And I want to go back to what you said earlier. It's hard work. I don't want people to think, we can snap our fingers and everything will change for the better. But lots of things in life that are meaningful are really hard work, and it's worth it. We can do it. And there's something, it's exciting.
Well, yeah. Well, if you take a professional athlete and they're out with an injury, they still have to get up and work on it. They mightn't be playing soccer, or they mightn't be in the pool, or they mightn't be on the track, but they still have to get up every day and do the physio, the hard work to get back to where they were. And I looked at that with my brain and trying to get back to the person I was and to feel safe. And that was one of the big things, is I didn't feel safe. Isn't your brain incredible? It's extraordinary the way, this isn't safe. And then it brings you to a place where it tells you in your body, you've got to get out.
It is incredible. I find it fascinating. One of the best things we could teach kids and adults is that you are the one that controls the system. So your brain is, just as you said, it's so fast in its detection of threat that it's unconscious for us. We don't even notice it until all of a sudden our heart is beating faster, our blood pressure is going up, cortisol and adrenaline are being released, our brain is sending oxygenated blood up into itself in order to, like, so it opens up the lungs more, and then it sends oxygenated blood into the brain so that we can think more quickly. Like, it's incredible what's happening, and it's all done by the brain. The brain is anticipating danger. So when you were talking about children who feel shame from bullying, I would want to teach those kids, you know what? I mean, we call it shame, but that's kind of an old fashioned word. Really, what you're doing is your brain is so smart that it's recognizing that a child or an adult is very aggressive. And it recognizes that, it's pretty fast. It's saying to itself, you can't fight that because you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you're not old enough, you don't have the power, whatever. You can't fight that. So what are we going to do? Let's make ourselves look small. Let's kind of roll our shoulders in. Let's put our head down. Let's not meet the eyes of the aggressor. Let's use this technique to stay safe. So then, if you taught kids, hey, your so-called shame, it's not shame. It's that you're being smart. Your brain is protecting you. Okay, so now that you're in a situation where you're safe, you can let go of that stance. It's outdated. It doesn't serve you anymore. It might have worked in the schoolyard when you were threatened or at home when you were threatened. But now you're in the workplace and you're this brilliant, fabulous professional. That's an outdated response. You're not under threat. We have to work really, we have to use our mind all the time. And I talk about this a lot in the Bullied Brain, ways in which we can use our mind to talk to our brain. Hey, brain, I'm at home now. There's no danger. I'm totally safe. Let's drop a plan together and figure out how to get out of the really toxic workplace. Not a good place to be. Don't like it. We
Yeah.
need to get way more into that habit.
Yeah, absolutely. So 11 countries were surveyed. 1 in 4 Irish teens have experienced cyberbullying, and we are the largest for cyberbullying in those 11 countries, the highest numbers. And just on the cyberbullying, so when a bully comes in and sees the reaction of his or her target, they can see that. How does that change, or their brain change from seeing them in person to behind a screen?
Well, so if I was bullying you right now, you and me here, my brain would have to register the pain I'm causing. You would show symptoms of, your eyes might fill with tears. You might look down. You might try and make yourself smaller. Like, I would be able to register. 'Cause brains are so incredibly sensitive. All they do is they make sense out of data all day long. So my senses would pick up that I'm hurting you. And that's hard for the brain because the brain is wired for empathy. You were born being able to read the powerful people in the room. You are born to understand their facial expression, their body expression, their tone of voice. Your brain is wired to recognize their feelings, their thoughts, even, and their intentions, because that's how brains stay alive. So, of course, we're wired for empathy. We're these little dependent creatures that aren't going to be strong enough to fend for ourselves till we're in our late teens, early 20s. So, when I can't see you and I'm just in my own cyber world and I'm trying to hurt someone because I feel so horrible about myself, I feel so risk, so threatened, so beaten down. I've decided to align with the aggressor. My brain's decided that that's going to keep me safer. So I'm demonstrating all over the place, all kinds of aggressive behaviors, hurtful, harmful, scary behaviors, but I'm not registering any harm. I can't see that it hurts anybody. So my brain is not pausing. It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
And so it's ramped up.
It's
So
getting ramped
they actually can't see that.
quickly. And think of it, it's just you saying that, Anita, makes me realize something interesting. Cyberbullying must be the most deadly thing on the planet for the person who's looking for a target, because you don't get the satisfaction. You don't get to feel like the angry, growling, powerful dog. You don't get to see the other person manifest fear. You don't get them to mirror back to you how powerful you are. The worst thing you can do to a cyberbully or any bully is
Ignore them.
just be like, wow, I feel really sorry for you. Sorry, I'm going to go play soccer. I feel really sorry for you. I'm going to go and read a book. I feel sorry for you. I'm going to go cook with my mom and dad now and have a nice dinner. Like, why do we give them so much power?
Yeah. If only we could teach the children coming up along that, these are techniques you could use. wow, I'm just going to watch my favorite program, or I'm going to turn on my PlayStation and talk to my friends there. Yeah, if we could teach them that, because a lot of them, like, unbelievable that an 8-year-old would know what suicide is, number one, or how to do it. Because in the teenagers that were interviewed, 1 in 4 experienced suicidal thoughts after cyberbullying.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, we have to teach kids that the phone does not control them. They control the phone. It's yet another thing where, you know, and adults are the worst for it because adults manifest addicted behaviors with their phones. You see parents with their little one walking with the baby in the stroller and they're glued to their phone. Well, 20 years ago, that parent would have been chatting to the little one. Hey, look at those birds and look, oh, yep, there's a dog. And, here we are, language, vocabulary, connection. Little ones' brains are really rapidly developing. And if the parent isn't looking at them, it's not good for their brain development. So, I mean, it's got to be, again, it's the adults. The adults have got to put their phones away. They don't need to have them. They don't need to be turned on at night when people are sleeping. Sleep is one of the most important things for the brain. No teenager should have a phone in their room that might beep or make any kind of a sound or be on at night. Put it away. It's just a device. I mean, it's incredible how people the brain normalizes everything. We've normalized the fact that you need to be available on a telephone day in, day out. You don't.
yes, I have to agree. I don't have children myself, but if I did, I wouldn't let them take their phones to bed,
Oh,
or,
leave it under the
just,
table. It's
yeah.
no, it's an unhealthy thing. And I mean, cyberbullying, God, I mean, the kids today are under so much social pressure and their brains are programmed starting at around 12, 13, all the way up to 24, 25. By evolution, their brain is being programmed to seek peer response. They're deeply, deeply engaged in what is their social status and what do their peers think of them. Well, that's what makes them even more addicted to their phones than adults because they need
Mhm.
to know what is my social standing. And if their social standing is under threat, it's very unhealthy for them. So, what we need to do is teach them that. Just say to them,
Yeah.
look, at 13, guess what? You're going to become obsessed with your peers. You're going to start to ignore your family. You're going to start to just not care about what your mom and dad think as much because your brain is primed to go and find a new tribe. And it's primed to go find a new tribe so that you will mate because your brain is deeply engaged in your safety, number one, and number two, procreating to pass your genes on to the next generation. You're just like every single other creature on this planet.
Yeah.
So, what are we going to do with that? How are we going to manage this time so that you remain healthy, happy, connected? You find that the tribe that loves you and you love them. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about your brain development. Let's manage it. Instead, right now, how many kids are being taught about adolescent brain development, right? Probably none.
I would say none. I didn't know anything about it till I started reading it myself.
Same with me.
We're just kind of told you have one, and it's good for you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I just think that'd be extraordinary if, like, they started from a young age, the kindergarten, the colouring in, it lights up when you see something you love, or you like your mother's coming through the door, or your dad's coming through your door, or your grandmother's coming through the door, and to show them, like, or if you get a treat, how your brain responds to that treat and the endorphins, um and through the school where we teach them every day, you use it like you learn how to write. Where they give the children the pencils and the special shaped pencils so they can hold it properly to learn to write. Who is even writing these days? But like we do that with the brain. Or if they're not at school, we are so slow to catch up. If they're not doing it, then parents do it. The parents that get involved and get behind the kids that want them. They're out on the football field 2-3 times a week, and they're out in all kinds of weather. Um, to do that as well with the brain, I just think it's fascinating that you can, you know, that we could prevent all this,
Mhm. And
prevent the later the mental health problems, the prison time, And we're going to talk about this next week, but you know how they go on then and abuse partners. And that's a whole other crisis that we're going into if we could do this prevention now.
I mean, we should be teaching kids about all these things. And instead we just let them go on into these really destructive, heartbreaking behaviors without giving them all the tools they need. Like, I like the fact that you talked about writing implements. We need to give kids all kinds of tools to know how to be happy, to know how to be successful, to know how to be healthy, to know what to do when things go wrong, to know how to build resilience, to know how to strengthen their brain if their brain is being weakened by trauma. I mean, all of this stuff is doable. I think teachers and coaches and parents, it would it would bring such enhancement to their lives if they learn to work with children's brains and not against them.
Mhm.
And they learned a lot because we adults, we weren't taught about brains. It's really quite new in a sense. And up until 20, 30 years ago, they didn't have non-invasive ways to look at the brain. They could only look at brains after the person died. Well, now technology allows us to look at the brain when it's actually responding. So just as you said, you can see the brain light up in response to things. You can measure cortisol. You can recognize a neurotransmitter like oxytocin, which they call the love hormone.
Mm.
Oxytocin is it's a beautiful thing. Like, we should be learning how to ensure that that's what our children have released in their brains when they see us, not fear. And
Yeah.
if no fear, well, then we need help. Like, we don't have to have this kind of this society that acts as if when things go wrong, it's got to be hidden and covered up. We need to learn how to be much more self-identifying and get help that we need. And as you say, like, if we just changed things, like, we don't need police intervention. Good Lord. We need psychologists. We need psychiatrists. We need mindfulness experts in our school. We need health people that teach brain health. We need a neuroscientist. Like, how come we don't have these people taking school to the next level? That's what
Yeah.
we need.
Why don't we have even 1 hour a week where, in some schools you have PE twice a week? Why don't we have 1 hour a week where we do the brain exercise
Exactly.
instead of going to the yard? Because like winters are miserable here. And so who wants to be going to the yard? But like if we did that 1 hour a week and talked about the neuroscience, the brain, and they could see how it works, because we just take it for granted every day. It's in our skull and we walk around and we don't give it a second thought until something happens. And then we're scrambling to try self regulate. We're scrambling to find out psychology on it. We're learning about our nervous system. But that's all when something happens and it's done. Instead of, if we could have the steps and the tools to doing that before it happened. So it doesn't happen, I suppose, essentially.
Well, just as we were talking about at the beginning, this is the upstream approach. It's prevention. You just like with the body. I mean, one of the best things for brain health is aerobic exercise. If the winter's miserable, get the kids running around inside because it's so good for their brains. It's one of the best ways to heal traumas to the brain is to pump it full of, it's called BDNF, and it's described as a fertilizer for the brain. It's really good for wiring in health. It's good for the neurogenesis, it's called the birth of new brain cells. Kids should be taught that too. Hey, every single time you're running around and having fun, it's really good for your brain. That's why we want you to run around every day. And you know what? It doesn't even need to be an hour. We could have our kids doing half an hour of brain training every day. And it's gamified, it's online. Dr. Michael Merzenich has designed it with his neuroscientists, international team of brilliant people. And they've designed this practice, this gamified practicing exercise basically that you're doing. And they've got research that shows it's immeasurably good for brains. So it's peripheral vision, it's decision making, it's impulse resistance, it's working memory. And you do these exercises and it's fun and it's inexpensive. All our kids should be doing it, and us adults too.
Yeah.
It's just that unto itself right there would be a world changing thing. And, we've got a half an hour to get on our phones and cyberbully somebody. Surely we've got half an hour where we could strengthen our own brain every day.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be brilliant. Thanks, Jen. That was a great session again today. And I look forward to doing the one next week. I will leave a link to the books and everything you've suggested today. And that's Jen Fraser from the Bullied Brain.
Thank you for joining us on the Femcast. We invite you now to stay connected with us by hitting the subscribe buttons below and follow us across our social media channels at the Femcast. We value your feedback and reviews. By sharing ideas, insights and experiences, we can all learn, grow and make a meaningful difference. We also want to remind you that we care about your well-being. If any topics discussed on today's episode have raised concerns or you need support, please visit our website www.thefemcast.com for helpful resources and phone numbers. Thank you for being part of the Femcast.